Okay, welcome everybody. We have our guest speaker today, Danusha. He's a GBC alumnus, and he'll tell us about his journey in analytics, and particularly in the nonprofit sector, which is very timely for the competition that many of you are working on. And that's all I have to say, other than giving it over to Danusha.
Okay. So Karen, am I good to share my screen?
Yes, you are.
Awesome. 1 second.
Very timely to have the presentation while the competition is going on. All right, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I understand you guys are coming after a 1 o'clock session as well, so really appreciate you guys making the time. So with that, let's kick things off. So analytics in the nonprofit sector. I'm going to keep this fairly light. I'm not going too in depth into all different kinds of numbers and such, but I will hang around after the session if you guys have any questions. And of course, feel free to reach out to me even afterwards. That being said, let's kick off. Okay, so before anything else, I think I'm going to have to tell you guys a little bit about myself, and I promise I won't bore you with this. For me, quite honestly, it has always been about data, and I've been in many different roles since I started working all the way back in 2007. I started off studying computer science, Bachelor of Computing and Information Systems. And on the day of my final exam, I kind of decided I didn't want to be a programmer, which then led me into joining a direct marketing company, where I joined them as an account manager or a client service person. 2 years there, and I moved into human resource management. Don't ask me why, we don't have enough time to get into that. Another year and a half in human resource management, and what I realized was I had now a background in computer science, experience in direct mail, experience in human resource management, but nothing really to tie everything together. So I went where any self-respecting person who had no idea what they were doing goes. I went on to Google. And lo and behold, I came across B409 at George Brown College. B409 for you guys would be what this program was called back in the day. And I say back in the day because I joined George Brown 10 years ago, 2010. Yes, you're talking to the old guy here. So joining B409, I got into strategic relationship marketing, which essentially brought all those skills that I accumulated over time into one. As you know, the program consists of a co-op period of 4 months. During that time, I joined an organization where I ended up working for the next 5 years. My final semester was rough, where I worked and studied at the same time. Luckily for me, the company that I was with was maybe 10 minutes walking distance from the campus, St. James campus. So made it a little bit easier, but was very hectic. 5 years into it, I came across let's say, a fork in the road in terms of my career, where I had to make a call as to why I was doing what I was doing. That's when I stumbled upon not-for-profits. Now, I've always been connected to not-for-profits. From the day I started working, where the first job that I was involved in was the Ceylon School for the Deaf and Blind. Then working in my co-op term, where I did so much work for not-for-profits like Alzheimer's, Canadian Cancer Society, the World Wildlife Fund, etc., etc. I've always been connected to it. So I've worked as an organization that sponsors or supports charities. I've worked as an organization that facilitates or acts as a third-party vendor to not-for-profits. And then my final switch, where I am currently working over the last 4 years at the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, I've been working actually physically within a not-for-profit. So yes, I've been through the gamut. I've gone through each different variation, each different industry or sector, so to speak. And this is where I am. And quite honestly, this is what I have enjoyed the most. So that's a little bit of background on me. So let's move on to the actual first slide. So before I get into not-for-profits, I do have to talk a little bit about analytics and the evolution of analytics. And let me just start off by saying, if you guys have any questions, I think there's the raise hand option. So please use that and ask away any questions that you might have.
And you can also post in comments and we'll call them out for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Karen. So the evolution of analytics. I'd like to look at this in 4 ways. Different people might do this in different ways, but this is something that Karen actually taught me. This is my presentation, so I'm sticking to it. So data, software, reporting, and the analyst. So let's start with data. How has data evolved? Come on.
I didn't teach you that part.
So when we started, or when back in the day, data was considered just what was essential to the organization. Could be something as simple as name, address, and the amount that they bought something for. Over time, people were looking at more information around individuals, mainly around prospecting, finding other customers. I'm going to use the word customers for now until I get to the not-for-profits, where customers will suddenly turn into donors. So more information about customers. Where do we get more of the customers that we have right now? Looking at that information, people started digging into more. For example, where do they work? How much do they earn? What other interests do they have? This led to working with multiple data sets. But again, there was an issue. Those multiple data sets were siloed, meaning each data set stood by itself, was managed by different individuals. There was not really a whole lot of cohesion when you think of it. And now you would have heard this word float around a lot, big data. That's the age that we're in. Hi, Tom. Is that Tom Supra?
Yes, Danusha. Hi. Nice to see you.
How are you?
Good, good. Please continue.
Just kicking off on your topic, big data.
Awesome.
So, big data. And again, there are lots of definitions out there for what big data is. My favorite is actually on Wikipedia. So I'm just going to blurt that out really quickly. Big data is a field that treats ways to analyze, systematically extract information from, or otherwise deal with data sets that are too large or complex to be dealt with by traditional processes. Now, as an analyst, as data people, it's critical to understand just because there's the word big in it does not mean we are talking about large pieces of data only. This could be every single data piece that the Canadian government has on tax information, or something as simple as the 15 customers of an ice cream shop around the corner. Big data is talking about how cohesive, how interlinked, how networked your data is within each of the components that you have. So, how has the software progressed? If you remember, back in the day, this was even before my time, software was used simply for support. You take numbers, you plop it on an Excel sheet just to get a table or a chart out so that you can plug it onto a report just to make it look nice. It then quickly turned into an essential utility where reports started to get built off of things like Excel, SAS, SQL, SQL Server, etc., etc. And now software is turning more into artificial intelligence and machine learning, where not only is software providing what we need, but it's also providing us with recommendations on what we didn't know we need. Reporting used to be tables. I'm sure everyone remembers those times where all our reports consisted of pages and pages and pages of tables and numbers, which quickly turned into summarized data sets, charts and graphs, things that make it easier to learn, easier to understand. And where we are now is the age of storytelling. Tables don't cut it, numbers don't cut it, charts don't cut it. We need to be able to tell a story with a beginning, a middle, and a very concrete end. We need to be able to identify who our audience is, cater to their needs, tell them what they want to hear as well as what they need to hear, but keeping in mind what the end goal is. And with that, we end up with how the role of the analyst has changed over time. It used to be that the analyst was just a generator of reports. You want someone to produce a report for you, or you are looking to get a report, oh yeah, let's just ask the analyst. What's the problem we have here? Software is doing that for you. So if by wanting to be an analyst, your objective is to just sit and build reports, I'm sorry to say, you've already been replaced. But what's happening now, and what you've learned, and I'm sure what you're continuing to learn at George Brown, is that you need to be providing insights. You need to look at data, you need to look at reports, you need to look at information that you have and not just present it, but provide insights and information that decision makers can take away and use in making decisions, in even creating new problems. The problem solver, which is where we're headed as analysts. Because as I mentioned, with artificial intelligence, with newer software, with big data, there are systems out there that are even capable of providing insights. So how do we as an analyst evolve? We need to go from the insight person to the problem solver. What does that mean? That means we need to identify issues before it hits the fray. We need to identify cases that might arise in future and create solutions for them. One of my first managers gave me a very critical piece of advice, and you would have heard this a million times. Do not come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. That is the role of the analyst going forward. That being said, we've talked about how it's evolved. What exactly is analytics? I break it down. Thank you, Karen. That being said, what is analytics? I like to break it down into 4 pieces: descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. A quick note on this little image here. I learned this is at George Brown as well. If you copy from one person, it's plagiarism. If you copy from multiple sources, it's research. So this image is research. I'm sticking to it. Descriptive analytics. What does that mean? I'm going to pitch that to the students out there. Anyone who can answer my question?
Sorry, what was the question? I was still on the plagiarism.
Sorry, my bad. Descriptive analytics. What does that mean?
Oh my gosh.
It's very simple. Just
I know.
Yeah. So let's see. Let's put it out there.
Cameron, come on. Oh, there you go. Alicia's good.
Awesome. Describe the numbers and summarize it. Very true. So here's my strength and weakness at the same time. I do not tackle problems in its holistic form. I break it down to its simplest possible entity. So when I'm looking at this, I look at it as descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. What does that mean? Essentially, think of it as a traveler. He goes, okay, where am I now? That's descriptive. Where am I right now? How did I get here? Diagnostic. If I keep going the exact same way I'm going, where will I end up? Predictive. Prescriptive, slightly different, when the traveler realizes that if he keeps going this way, he's not going to end in the spot where he actually wants to go to. So he makes an adjustment and makes a conscious decision to move elsewhere in order to get to where he actually wants to go. So some examples here. Descriptive analytics, as Alicia said, an example would be we do a marketing campaign. We want to see how successful it is, a direct marketing campaign. How much revenue did we gather? What was the average gift value? What was the response rate? Simple. Diagnostics. Who did we mail in order to get that response? Who did we not mail in this particular direct mail piece? Diagnostic. If we continue to mail these same people asking for or promoting the exact same product, where will we likely end up by the end of the year? Predictive analytics. Now, all that's well and good, but when your CEO comes to you and says, well, your prediction lands us $500,000 short of what our actual target is, we have a problem. Suddenly, you're looking at prescriptive analytics. What can we do to make sure that we realign our strategy to get the additional $500,000? Now, these types these types of analytics, as you can see, the value that it provides is directly proportional to the level of complexity. The descriptive analytics piece is simply putting numbers on an Excel sheet or a chart and producing it in front of you, whereas prescriptive analytics and even predictive analytics could involve so many different things, from regression analytics to various different types of software, from SAS to SQL to, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but Alteryx to even Salesforce, which we are currently working on at CNIB. So let's get to the not-for-profit sector. In a nutshell, as an analyst, these are the three key elements that you need to focus on primarily. 84% of Canadians, that's 23.8 million, donate to charities. And they donate about $450 per year. And each of these donors support an average of 3.8 organizations.
So competitive.
Oh, I haven't gotten to the punchline yet, even, Karen.
Sorry.
No, that's good. So that's what we're looking at. As a not-for-profit or a charity, what we're trying to do is A, be a piece of this pie. Secondly, or B, become one of, if not the largest portion of this pie. Can anyone name the hidden issue here? There's something that I haven't focused on. Anyone?
Size of the pie?
The size of the pie right now is $446. Not only true, but the 446, let's say the 446 is earmarked towards not-for-profits. Let me answer the question.
It's too hard. Oh, of course.
So if you're if I'm one in, or if Karen is one individual making $450 donations to charities, and she's only giving to 4 organizations, what do the other 160 or 169,996 charities do? Right? This is where the analyst comes into play. This is where data comes into play, actually. I'm sure everyone's heard of customer dynamics or consumer dynamics. We have something very similar for donors as well, donor dynamics. So I'm going to take you guys through a few instances or a few things that we analyze or look at when we look towards becoming a piece of this pie. Giving patterns. Now, one thing that I must preface is you could be a significant piece of this pie, but that's not the end of the story. You could lose a donor on any given day. You could lose a donor, you could lose a chunk of donors, you could gain new donors, but the objective here is how do you manage with this level of competition? So, giving patterns. What does that mean? How much does a donor give? How often do they give? Is there a particular time frame? Do you give during Christmas? Are you giving during tax time only? Do you just give at the beginning or at the end of the year? Are you influenced by a particular type of charity or ask? I will give you an example. At CNIB, we recently launched our guide dog program. What we realized was, since launching the guide dog program, a strong majority of our donors exclusively give during our guide dog appeal. And appeal here, for those who are not familiar with the fundraising side of things, an appeal is very similar to a campaign or a direct mailing or something of that nature. So when we do make an appeal, we've noticed that people who are inclined towards guide dogs just keep giving purely the guide dog program. Giving capacity. If a donor makes a $100 donation every year, and on one fine day, one of our door-to-door vendors meet the exact same donor and they just make a $10 donation, does that mean we base our analytics on that donor's last gift and just talk to them as a $10 donor? Absolutely not. Their giving capacity is actually $50. It was just this off-the-cuff gift that they made that dropped their average gift value. Also, what's their age bracket? Where do they live? Do they give to other charities? That all falls into the giving capacity of any donor. Responsiveness. If we send an individual 10 mail pieces and they only respond to 2, and they keep responding to the same 2 mail pieces at the exact same time of the year, is there a point of continuing to send them the additional 8 mail pieces? Likelihood to lapse. As much as we're focused at, as much as for-profits are focused on customer retention, donor retention is almost as important, if not more. It takes approximately $300 to $350 for any given charity. Oh, actually, I'm talking more specifically to CNIB, to acquire a monthly donor. And if that's the case, can we afford to lose that donor after they make $50 or $60? Absolutely not. So we have to keep in mind, what is the likelihood of a donor to lapse or stop giving after they've been acquired? Once they've dropped off, once they've lapsed, how do we recover them? What's the rate of lapse? What's the attrition? What's the retention? Engagement. There are donors who give to multiple causes within CNIB, within the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. We have individuals who are donors, who are volunteers, who are board members, who are clients, meaning individuals with vision loss. The more areas that these people are involved in, the more engaged with the organization they are. All that is found through analytics. Influence. What are the chances that you could bring another donor into your favorite charity? If you are donating to the World Wildlife Fund and it's something that you're passionate about, will you be able to influence a friend or family member to give to the same organization? Influence. How do you find that information out? Check in the database who the individual is related to. Find out where they work, if you have that information. Find out if they give to other charities, if they are involved in other activities within your organization. What level of influence do they have? Cross-targeting. As I mentioned, we have the guide dog program that we've launched at CNIB. What's the likelihood of someone who's given towards the guide dog program to give towards the library, to printing of braille books, to creating audio CDs? Do they give to other channels? We need to find out. Demographics, like I mentioned before, age plays a huge part. A recent survey has proved that the older you get, the more you give towards charity. Not the frequency, but the actual dollar value continues to increase. You may not give as often, but when you give, it's worth a lot. All these things need to be analyzed, need to be evaluated, need to be reported on, insights need to be built, decisions need to be made. So who does this? Demographic trends show, oh, sorry, lost you there, Karen. Do demographic tend to show up in predictive modeling? Yes, they do. It actually depends. That's a good question, Karen. So do demographics tend to show up in predictive modeling? Yes, they do. But in the not-for-profit sector, it is a little trickier because, and this is a Danushaism. I haven't seen this in any books, but I strongly believe that the propensity to give is more to do with the heart than to do with the brain. And there is a lot more that goes into that decision-making process than demographics. So when we are doing something like predictive link, demographics does play a role, but not as much as it would when you're looking at a FMCG. Does that make sense, Karen? Awesome. All right.
Did you tell them what FMCG was already?
Sorry?
Did you tell them that acronym already?
Gosh, no.
No, you didn't.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh, okay. Can anyone answer the question? There's something. FMCG, anyone?
These guys are all looking for secrets for their modeling competition. They're not asking.
Okay. Oh, there you go. Perfect. Ding, ding, ding. Fast-moving consumer goods.
Okay.
All right. Moving on. So, to answer the question, who does all this work? The analyst. Now, it's very true that the role of the analyst used to be few and far between amongst charities. But over the last 10 years, every organization has moved towards doing, first of all, doing their own data processing, doing their own analytics, not going to a third party and handing all their information. This is a result of data security issues, as well as making sure that their information remains proprietary to them. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with what's called trading, but when it comes to finding new donors for an organization to make charitable contributions, it's not easy. It's actually a lot more difficult than it would be for a for-profit organization. Because like I said, this is not something that an individual has to do. It's something that they choose to do. You don't have to give to charity, you choose to give to charity. So to find more such people is extremely difficult. So one thing that organizations do is they've decided between not-for-profits, they exchange their donor lists amongst them. So if you donate to the Canadian Cancer Society and you suddenly get a letter from the Alzheimer's Society or CNIB, don't be surprised. That's as a result of trading lists. But what's happened over the last few years is people have been moving away from this because donors want their privacy. Donors don't want their names exchanged across other not-for-profits. So with that coming to an end, finding new donors become innately more difficult. So just went off on a tangent there, but essentially, as an analyst, we are looking at 4 key elements. So Fahad's question, is trading compliant against PIPEDA? It depends on whether it's a question that was explicitly answered by the donor. If we have to get explicit consent from the donor in order to trade their name. Because of these, how can I put this? Because of these variations, organizations such as CNIB have stopped trading lists so that we don't tread on any legal issues. Does that answer your question?
So yes, but
Yes.
it's not used as often anymore
No, not at all.
because it's too complicated. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And just to elaborate on that, Karen, it becomes more complicated when lists mix together. You could get an individual who has signed up with Alzheimer's and given them explicit consent, but signed up with the Canadian Cancer Society and not given them explicit consent. Suddenly, a different organization rents both lists, mail them out, and the donor turns around and goes, "Where did you get my name from?" "Got it from CCS." "Well, I've never given them consent." Next thing you know, legal issues. Anyways, moving on. As an analyst, you are looking at 4 key elements: extraction, cleansing, analysis, and reporting. I know there's a 5th in there. I will get to it in a second. Extraction essentially leads to data extractions, meaning data that we extract for communicating with donors. Could be a direct mail piece, could be an email, a text message, a phone call, even a personal visit. The data being extracted needs to be done by an individual. And not just any individual, but an individual who knows the ins and outs of the database. For example, if a donor has said, "Do not contact me via phone," are we able to text them? Are we able to send them an SMS? Technically, yes. Logically, no. So someone needs to have a conversation with the organization to figure out what their boundaries are, what areas they're willing to push a little bit further on the envelope, if you'd like to put it that way. I'm sure everyone's aware of the National Do Not Call list. People need to register to get on those lists. After a certain, after a certain point, they need to re-register after a certain number of years. So all that needs to be managed and maintained and kept an eye on by whoever's doing the data extractions. And I can speak for myself and CNIB to say that on average per year, I do anything between 40 to 60 different data extractions. And that spans across the full 12 months. And the 40 to 60 would include everything from mailing lists to phone lists to text to email. Cleansing. Data, as you know, is not always clean. There are errors in the data, there's duplicates, there's innate flaws, there are capitalization issues, things that donors do not like to see. Nothing we've identified recently that nothing ticks off a donor more than sending a letter to them with their name in all caps. It's like someone screaming at them. And knowing our donor base, we've had countless letters come back to us saying, why do you keep yelling at me through your letters? And answering those questions become that much more difficult if the person involved in pulling the data or cleansing the data is not on point. We've already spoken about analysis, all those different types of analytics that need to be done. We, or in this case, you guys, will end up doing it. The reporting, the storytelling of it all, making sure that the people who need to know get to know what they need to know. That is on you. And all this together builds insights. Here's a few misconceptions around not-for-profits. It's easier. No, it's not. I can tell you that from experience, having worked in all the different types of sectors and industries, it's definitely not easier. I'm not saying it's harder, but you cannot categorize it as being easier. Some days, sometimes it does become harder. Not as money focused as other organizations. I could not disagree more. The non-for-profit sector or the nonprofit sector is probably more money focused than other organizations. Why? Because like I said before, donors are not obligated to donate. That is a choice. If we screw up as a nonprofit, if a donor stops giving, the donor loses nothing. The donor will easily go into another organization and start giving to them. We are the ones who lose. Whereas an FMCG, if you stop buying milk, or if you stop buying a particular brand of milk, you'll switch to something else. If you stop buying a particular brand of ice cream, you'll move to something else. You can't stop buying gas. If you're ticked off at Shell, you're not going to stop buying gas. But donors can stop giving. Reactive rather than proactive. Quite honestly, that depends on the organization. We at CNIB, I can safely say that we were very proactive with the current situation with COVID. We immediately started looking at the potential of donors dropping off, how we can reacquire them, what steps we need to take when we restart active acquisitions in future, and if the budget will be used accordingly. And that ball started rolling all of 4 weeks, 5 weeks ago. New to using data and analytics? Absolutely not. Anyone here, without Googling it, can you tell me how old CNIB as an organization is?
100.
Yep. Thank you, Karen. We have a question. How you keep track of donors getting
Trading.
So, Lily, do you mean how do we keep track of donors dropping off, as in stopping their donation? Yeah. So we can look at trends. If it's a long-standing donor, and if we can identify that they give every year in, let's say, December, and we've identified that they have not given last year in December, there's a red flag. If it's a monthly donor, if they suddenly skip a couple of payments and nothing's wrong with their credit card, it's not expired, or no issues with the bank, then we know that something's off. Quite honestly, they could turn around and say, cancel my donation from now on. That's the easiest way of tracking how and when donors drop off. And when they do, we flag them. We make sure that if they've explicitly not said, do not contact me, we make a strategic effort of going back to them at particular points which they've shown interest in the past, and reach out to them during those times, hoping that they'll come back to us. I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Okay. So 100 years, Karen, like you said, and that's 100 years worth of data. So no, we're not new to data. We've actually had data for longer than a lot of the for-profit organizations out there. Have we been using it correctly? Probably not. But have we been using it actively at least for the past 20 to 30 years? 100%. We wouldn't be 100 years old if we didn't. How far back is data helpful in predictive models? Good question. Depends on what you're trying to measure. If we are looking at donor giving, well, as a rule of thumb, one of the things that I keep in mind is if we've made, right, funds donated after, yeah. So we would be very mindful when working in and around a recession period. That's where we see dramatic fluctuations one way or the other. If you look at nonprofit donations over the past 10 years or 15 years, you'd see that there have been a few ebbs and flows, and everything has worked around some kind of social element, whether it was a recession, whether it was this is a perfect example. So whatever happens post-COVID is going to dramatically change any kind of predictors that we've built thus far.
Just a bit.
Sorry.
Just a bit.
So whatever work that I've done pre-March, focusing on everything that we're going to do starting in our new fiscal, as our fiscal begins in April, everything's gone out the door, and I'm currently working day and night trying to rebuild everything, looking at completely different regression models. Regression doesn't even apply at this point, because this is not something that we can really measure until we see results. Every day I get either 2 or 3 phone calls or emails saying, where do you see revenue ending up by the end of April? Where do you see revenue ending up at the end of the quarter? Unfortunately, at this point, I don't know. This is a first. This is a first for me. This is a first for everyone. So it'll be exciting as well as terrifying coming out of this. I hope I answered your question, Karen.
Good. Yes.
Thank you. Dirty data is rampant. Is data as bad as everyone says it is in not-for-profits? Absolutely not. You know why? Because we need to communicate to the donor. Because unlike a for-profit, the customer does not come to us. We need to go to the customer. So we need to make sure that the customer data is actually in better condition, because no donor is going to make a $10, $15, $30, $20, $30 donation, is going to come back and say, oh, hey, you need to change my address from here to here because I moved. Absolutely not. But if you are working at the Bay and you have the Bay credit card, that information is going to come to you automatically by the customer. So we need to be more on point, more clinical in how we address data and keep it clean and keep it safe. We work for free. Just because the organization is a nonprofit does not mean that we don't make a profit. We are pretty much the same as any other organization. We work hard, we earn a living, and we get compensated accordingly. You couldn't make it elsewhere. That's why you're working in a nonprofit. Now, this is something that has stuck in my craw for the longest time. Simply because I've had this question asked from me by people working in nonprofits. I was very recently asked the question of, well, if you can do all these cool types of analytics and provide all these reports, why aren't you out there making millions? There, ladies and gentlemen, is our biggest problem. We are creating our own stigma. So take it from me, if and when you do join or decide to join nonprofit, you will meet some amazing people. You will meet individuals that are dedicated, have a drive, have a passion towards what they do like no other. So no, it's not because they couldn't make it anywhere else. It's that they chose to be in this line of work. Not to say that there aren't a few that, how can I put this diplomatically, fell into nonprofits. And finally, you can never go anywhere else. Completely false. The things that you learn in a nonprofit actually gives you a completely different point of view or a different type of understanding on how for-profits work. And that could be a strength for you when you go back into the for-profit sector, if you choose to do so, to give them a different point of view from what they see on a regular basis. So, are you ready to work with data in a nonprofit? Ask yourselves these questions. Do you like working with people? Because like I said, you're going to meet a lot of people, a lot of different people. And you're going to have to work with different personalities, different characteristics, and you're going to find some lovely people in there as well. Are you ready to learn? What you've learned is going to be very useful to you, but there are things that you will learn fresh. You need to be ready to grasp that information and turn it around immediately. You're willing to unlearn. A critical part of taking on any role at any job, at any organization. What you learn outside of that organization does not always apply within. Skill sets are transferable. Knowledge about an organization is not. If you are used to doing something a particular way in company A, that doesn't mean that's the exact same way that B through Z is going to function. So be prepared to unlearn. Are you good at multitasking? From personal experience, I can tell you that I am currently working with 5 different business units within CNIB. I work with philanthropy, I work with finance, I work with IT, I work with HR, I work with services. That's 5. There you go. And everyone needs you for something at some point or the other on any given day. So make sure that you are paying enough attention to detail, but also being able to identify where you can cut things off, how to manage your workload, multitask, don't burn yourself out. Are you bilingual? This doesn't mean English and French. What I'm talking about is, do you speak data and do you speak marketing? And more importantly, if you do speak both languages, are you able to mix them into one? Are you able to talk to a marketing person and explain to them the data side of things? Are you able to talk to a completely tech-savvy individual who has no idea about marketing and leave that meeting or conversation giving them a little bit more insight about marketing? This is going to be critical for you. Absolutely. Do you like to explore? And this doesn't necessarily just relate to nonprofits, but probably a little more so to nonprofits. Data and analytics has got so much to do with exploring. You need to be able to go head on, feet first into data and just find things. Not to say that you'll always find important things, but you'll find things. But you need to be able, or you need to be dedicated enough to go through that process, explore, and go into all these nooks and crannies that the data will allow you to see and find it. Are you comfortable being wrong? I'm comfortable enough, and Karen and Tom may or may not agree with me here, but as an analyst, what I found is at least 80% of what you do turns out in someone's trash can. And you are basically, as an analyst, you are out there looking for a unicorn.
I like it.
If and when you do find it, that's going to be what turns everything around for you and the organization. Yes, there's stuff there is stuff that you do day to day. There's the data extractions, there's the cleaning of data, there's the standard analytics. How's this campaign performed? How's this appeal done? Predictions, etc., etc. But when you find that one thing that says, hold on a second, this is something that I didn't see, that is insight. Exactly. I know for a fact that it took me 3 years to build a segmentation strategy that is unique to CNIB. What is my favorite insight? Oof. Good one. I would say when I rejigged RFM. I'm sure everyone's familiar with RFM. Recency, frequency, and monetary. It's one of the old school strategies when it comes to segmentation. And this came after lots of trial and error, but I replaced, I did my own type of segmentation. I did what I call devotion, loyalty, and frequency. Devotion would essentially mean how engaged or involved the donor is with the organization. Loyalty is how frequently, or rather how consecutively have they been giving in the recent past. And sorry, I said frequency at the end. It's not frequency, it's actually monetary. So what is their giving capacity? So through devotion, lost my train of thought there. Through my rejigged RFM strategy, we saw an increase of 17% on direct mail campaigns in terms of response rate year over year.
How do you measure devotion?
So devotion, you're right. So this is a little inside baseball, but it changes from one organization to another, but on a really basic scale, how many unique years has a donor given over the last 10 years?
So it's a derived variable.
Exactly. And then loyalty could be considered, have they given consecutively over the last 3 years? Just a simple yes or no. And then finally, you map it together with giving capacity, which is a completely different calculation altogether. You are looking at a completely different style of segmenting your donors. What this enables you to do is not only look at your recent donors, but even apply the exact same logic to people who've lapsed and look at who is worth bringing back. So, yes, are you comfortable in being wrong? Are you comfortable making, or are you comfortable with 20% of your work resulting in 80% of your success? And finally, do you enjoy what you do? I can't stress this enough. If you do not enjoy working with data, if you do not enjoy doing analytics, if you don't enjoy spending hours upon hours upon hours doing the dirty work, this is what you're looking for. So just one parting thought from me really quickly. This is something that I've learned later in my years, but every one of us has a why. Why do you do what you do? Why do you wake up early in the morning and go to class? Why do you do the job that you do? Why do you scratch and you claw and you try to get up in whichever organization that you're working in? Find that why, whatever that why is for you. I found it a little late, but I did. But when I found it, it changed my life. So find your why and let it inspire, drive, and guide you to your success. Good luck to all of you, and I hope you enjoyed this session. I'm open to any questions.
Well, people are thinking about their questions, Danusha. Thank you very much for sharing your career journey and your experiences in this field. It's a huge field, lots of opportunity. Data will become more important, so worth considering as a sector. For sure. Any questions from the group? Any secrets that you're going to take away for your modeling project in the competition?
And of course, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and so on. I know that a couple of you have already. I apologize if I haven't accepted your invites yet. It's been a bit hectic. I will do that shortly.
Danusha, you were so clear on your presentation. It's Tom here. I'm sure that there aren't any questions because you were just so clear. It was great. Thank you so much. I need to jump off myself, but great hearing from you, and thank you, everybody. And thank you, Danusha. Thank you. Awesome as usual. Thanks, Karen, of course.
Okay, so we have continuing on for the rest of the week. We've got the workshops on at 1 o'clock for the rest of the week. Michael and Anissa will be doing visualization on Thursday. And then we have another speaker scheduled for next Tuesday. And off the top of my head, I've totally forgotten about it. Who it is? Does anyone else remember? Shoot. Nathaniel Strang is coming to talk about blockchain next week, April 28th. So hope to see you guys. Danusha, thank you very much. And I'm sure the students will reach out to learn more. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.